Mega Man to this day is one of my favorite video game series of all time. It was a series born in the late 80s with the goal of getting its developer, Capcom, on the radar of home console players. At the time, they were primarily an arcade developer, with hits such as Street Fighter, Commando, and other well-acclaimed games. But they needed a game for NES owners to gravitate to. They settled on an action platformer starring a robot fighting for justice and what's right, a blue color scheme chosen due to the NES color palette having a larger selection of blue, a detailed world of colorful characters with a unique structure encouraging replayability. With that, Rockman was born. Yeah, Rockman. Capcom USA looked at that and thought something like, "You guys are freaking stupid," and changed that to Mega Man. Directed by Akira Kitamura, who also designed the character, with Keiji Inafune using that as a jumping point to design the rest of the world and characters. I know this isn't as commonly mistaken anymore, but it's been told wrong for years, so I might as well say Keiji Inafune was credited as the father of Mega Man for years, but he refuses the title, and if anyone deserves it, it's Kitamura. Them and 4 other people worked on the game, striving for perfection. This was Capcom's first console game aside from ports, so they wanted the best possible quality. The series' art direction has always been great to me. The Japanese box art's great, the game's colorful characters and world are shown front and center. In America, I mean, what can I say? It's one of the most infamous game boxes ever. How did they get this 50-year-old dude with a gun out of these sprites? Is it really a surprise the series almost died here? The European art is weird. Mega Man looks live action, but Wily and the Robot Masters look drawn on next to him. Mega Man sold very poorly. Critically, it was received very well, but financially, it was a complete failure. Outside of Japan, it was hardly, if at all, advertised, and what kid would want to rent, let alone buy, any game with this box art? Maybe I shouldn't be so hard on it, the artist was given 6 hours to make it. Now that I've established the history of the game's development, I think before going into the game itself, I should quickly go over my history with the series. This establishes what the series means to me and the lens through which I view the series. I first played Mega Man 9 on my uncle's Wii when I was like 5 or 6. He also let me play 8 a few years later on his PS Vita. I rediscovered the series a few years after that thanks to the internet. I received the Mega Man Legacy Collection on 3DS for Christmas, which I don't remember asking for, but I'm not complaining either. As you might be able to guess, I sucked at these games. I couldn't beat any Robot Master for weeks, but I still played these games often because I liked the aesthetics, the areas, the boss designs, and I thought their structure was really interesting. But because of those reasons, I wanted to be competent at these games. As time went on, I only appreciated those aspects more and started to appreciate the level design and especially the challenge. At this point, I've played every classic game, but I haven't beaten them all yet. And I've gotten into the other series within the series. I've beaten every mainline Mega Man X game and Extreme 2. I've beaten Mega Man 01 and started 02. I've tried Battle Network 3, and my most anticipated game of all time was easily Mega Man 11. I was so excited for that game to come out, and especially to play it after hearing positive things about it online. The only games that have come close are Mario Odyssey, Sonic Forces and Frontiers, and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. With that said, it's safe to say I'm a pretty big fan of the series. Also, here I'll acknowledge the fact that my footage looks really bad. I'd have my phone in the dark, on a stand, elevated, pointing at my 2DS that I had to be holding entirely still, which in hindsight I should have used my new 3DS XL instead of my little brother's 2DS. By the time I was recording, I didn't feel like messing with how far I had to zoom in for that to work. Nothing screams. I'm doing the best I can, I freaking swear. Quite like my setup. Hopefully the next videos won't look as bad. They still might, though. I didn't want to use footage that wasn't my own, so this is the best I can really do for now. Also, I didn't use save states. People will get mad if I did. I used autofire, but I don't really care about that. So with that said, let's finally get into the actual game. In the year 2000X, 2 scientists by the names of Dr. Thomas Light and Dr. Albert Wiley are colleagues in the field of robotics. Though the two are friends, an issue arises when only one of their researches can be continued. Dr. Wiley wants to use a special double gear system he made to give robots the speed and power needed to be heroes and earn respect from the general population. Dr. Light believes that could be dangerous, and he wants to pursue the definitely completely safe goal of robots with free will. Those who can think and act freely, essentially like humans do, which I'm sure could do no harm to the world. Everyone sides with Dr. Light's research over Wiley's, making Wiley jealous of Light. As Dr. Light's research continues, he works with Wiley on a robot that can do as it pleases. They equip it with an arm cannon and a shield, and they name it Proto Man. After he's made, he decides he wants to leave. They decide to do nothing about it. Light works independently on 8 more such robots. The first 2 he makes as an assistant and for helping do housework, respectively named Rock and Roll. Get used to the music puns because they're not going away. Honestly, these are kind of music puns that don't make me want to die, so I'm fine with it. The other 6 he makes are for helping do work for others. Gutsman, Iceman, Electman, Bombman, Fireman, and Cutman. One day, those 6 start going berserk, and it doesn't take long to find out why. Dr. Wily reprogrammed into his robots with the sole purpose of taking over the world. Rock, who was encoded with a strong sense of justice, volunteers to be turned into a fighting robot. Rockman! Yeah! Mega Man, if you're not in Japan, you get my points. Also, do the police not exist? Well, there are in Mega Man 9, so either they don't have police for a few decades, or they only believe stupid and obvious lies. I want to mention that almost none of what I just said comes from the game or the manual, at least not in America. This was the age where manual writers could just disregard any story other regions had and make up whatever they felt like. This is impossible to get away with now, but this game has it really bad. Dr. Wily reprogrammed a Dr. Wright's robots, so Mega Man has to save the city of Monsteropolis. If you give a city a name like that, then expect this kind of disaster daily. The only cool thing about this manual is that it comes with a thank you from the real Captain Commando himself. The term Robot Master came from this manual, and it sticks in the fanbase to this day simply because it sounds cool. Also, there's a lot of plot summary that doesn't get addressed until future games. 3, 4, 11, and Powered Up explain a lot of this stuff, and while not all of it's essential for this game in particular, it's still important enough to where I thought it'd be worth mentioning. In the game itself, we get nothing, not even a proper title screen, pure black and a logo. Guess that's all you need. When you start, you get a level select, which was pretty revolutionary. Each boss will give you a unique weapon that's good against another boss. This encourages replayability to find out what bosses are weak to what weapons, and what situations the weapons are best in. Normally, I kind of neglect the replayability aspect, though. In these games, I normally find a route and stick with it, so I did 2 playthroughs for this review. One with my normal route starting at Gutsman, and one starting at Fireman, who is actually hard to kill Buster only if you simply do this. The basic gameplay is that Mega Man can jump and shoot lemons, original joke. The controls are simple. Consistent is a good word. Mega Man's jumps aren't affected by his momentum. This doesn't mean anything about his normal walking, though. It takes a good moment to stop walking. It makes the controls feel a bit slippery. In the air, you don't carry momentum like this if you stop before hitting the ground, so that makes platforming more tolerable. Thankfully, later games' controls feel a lot more precise. The levels you go into are fun to play for the most part. What I want in this series is stages with good platforming and interesting combat, one that can be approached differently with different weapons. At this, for the most part, the game succeeds. The levels in this game, more so than most other games in the series, are based around flow. Mega Man 1, more than anything, punishes hesitation and slow thinking. If you're confident and just go for it, most screens can be cleared pretty simply. Gutsman stage works like this, where most obstacles won't hit you if you're constantly moving. I also found Fireman and Bombman stages satisfying to go through with the correct flow. The game can slow itself down too when necessary. The very beginning of Gutsman stage has this really cool platforming bit. It's the kind of thing I either get on my first or 5 millionth try with no in-between, but either way, this bit has a good rhythm to it. Electman's stage is vertically oriented, and the patterns in the stage are fun to master. It goes on for a bit too long for my liking, with some copy and paste design and a checkpoint that is really awkwardly placed. Iceman's stage in the first half is pretty annoying, with the penguins being harder to avoid than necessary. In the second half, we get the invisible blocks, a series staple. Here, there are blocks placed to trick you. Immediately after, we get footholders. These guys have random patterns, absurd hitboxes, and shoot projectiles. I didn't bother actually trying this more than once without using the magnet beam, because if you die, the checkpoint's at the beginning of the invisible block segment. The levels aren't amazing overall, but they are enjoyable and have a pretty consistent and satisfying flow to them. At the end of each stage, there's a hallway that leads to the boss. The bosses are made to where some can easily be beaten with just the buster, and others you practically need to find their weakness. The weaknesses are actually pretty clever. Firestorm is effective against Bombman because fire lights the fuse of a bomb. Bombs are used for mining, which Gutsman is weak to since he specializes in rocks. This game did start the series tradition of not being able to decide if fire is good against ice or if ice is good against fire, though. The patterns to these bosses are either incredibly consistent or incredibly not. Fireman is the worst example. He spams harder than a 5-year-old playing Ness in Smash Brothers. Cutman's also pretty bad about it. The weakness is shut the bosses down to the point where there practically is no fight. That is arguably bad design, although I think if you know the weaknesses and use them, it should be easier. Probably not as easy as it is, though. If you really want to break this game, though, in this game exclusively, pressing select simply stops everything. I don't know who would use this as a pause as opposed to the weapon select, but boss invincibility doesn't pause, so you can use this to kill bosses even easier. I tried to abuse it last on my second playthrough, though. There are other glitches and tricks I used to make this game easier on me. I avoided those on the second playthrough as well, and the only times I did use them, the question was less so, can I do this without this trick? More so, do I feel like replaying the level for getting a game over if I don't use this? This game is actually pretty darn hard. The entire series is difficult, and I really like that about it. This is easily the hardest of the NES games, though. I think Mega Man 9 is harder overall, but this game still has some really tough segments. I still game over it a few times, and I'm pretty familiar with this game. I've mentioned a few tough segments already, but even enemies can be annoying. These smiley face dudes have an obnoxious pattern if you don't have Firestorm. Sniper Joe is difficult to handle, especially if you don't have Ice Slasher. Footholders, screw off. These guys at the end of most levels. The best way to deal with these guys is Magnet Beam. Shoot one at ground level and another at the peak of your jump. Then you can jump over him regardless of how high he jumps. Now enjoy not having a third of your health bar obliterated. This game's difficulty is consistently high, but not always consistently fair. Knockback is something this game gets really bad with. Some damage values are really dumb. Sometimes the game will throw a bunch of crap at you and hope you can deal with it. I'll cover more specific cases later. I've mentioned the special weapons a few times, and with them, I'm split down the middle. Of the 6 weapons, 2 are pretty good, 2 are amazing, and 2 are awful. It's important to mention that each weapon has ammo to worry about. Gutsman's super arm is too contact sensitive. You pick up specific blocks and throw them. The issue is that the blocks are only in a few levels, and the toss comes with a blind spot that hurts its otherwise really good coverage. Ice Slasher from Iceman freezes enemies and lets you attack them a lot. If it disabled enemy hitboxes, it'd be great. As it stands, it's perfectly fine. It can also freeze fire, but that's only relevant in 2 stages. Elecman's Thunderbeam is one of the best weapons in the entire series. It's huge, goes in 3 directions, and is really freaking strong. Bomb Man gives you Hyper Bomb, which is one of the worst weapons in the series. You drop a bomb and it's surprisingly weak. Enemies in this game are constantly moving, so waiting for this to do nothing is ineffective. Firestorm, which you get from Fireman, is amazing. It's fast and powerful. While using it, you get a protective wheel of fire that does great damage. Rolling Cutter, the weapon of Cutman, is effective at dealing with specific types of enemies. Its poor range leaves it as good and not much more. In Elecman's stage, you can find the Magnet Beam, not a weapon, but a mobility item, and I don't think it's controversial to say that it's the best mobility item in the entire series aside from Rush Jet and Mega Man 3. You can create platforms and choose the length of them. This breaks the back half of the game. You can skip a lot with this. The only restriction is the ammo and the platforms disappearing. Memorizing these weapons' strengths is another way to make the game more replayable and vary depending on the ones you like. Enemies are also weak to certain weapons, and using them effectively is a way to rethink and experiment with every level. There are a lot of enemies that will get killed quickly by other weapons when the buster will take longer. You can get health and ammo drops from enemies, but they're really rare for some reason. Some people will get mad at the special weapon ammo not replenishing on death, but that doesn't really become an issue for me until the end game. Before we get to that though, let's give the presentation some attention. This series has consistently great art direction, which is channeled into some great visuals for an NES game. It was way ahead of its time. This game came out in 1987, and this art style was having great effect in 1993 by the time the 6th game came out. Even in the late 2000s with 9 and 10. Granted, there were some upgrades in those years, but it stayed relatively similar. This Mega Man sprite is perfect, no exaggeration. It is the best portrayal of the character we've ever been given. Yeah, Mega Man 8 looks better, and objectively 7 does too, but there's some undeniable charm to the NES sprites. Everything else pops out so pleasantly and looks great. The 2 main reasons the art style works so well is because, well, 1, the sprites are well made, and 2, outlines. They make everything stand out really well. Compared to other games, ones with outlines in their sprite work tend to look better because of how important things pop out. In general, when drawing, I tend to include outlines or at least use contrasting colors. This game does both and looks really great for it. Level aesthetics are a different story. Foregrounds look good, but most backgrounds are a single color. Backgrounds that include a bit more detail look really good, but most of them don't even have clouds in the sky. And now, I know this is a controversial opinion, but if you ask me, the soundtrack in this game is similarly great. It's not one of the best in the series, but it solidified the series' reputation for having excellent OSTs. The only issue with this one is that the higher notes have the tendency to squeal a bit, but aside from that, these are really solid compositions. The energy of these songs and the way that they're arranged really work for me. There probably could be more backing tracks in general in most songs, although the songs are pleasant as is. After the Robot Masters have been defeated, it's time to take on Dr. Wily himself. There are 4 Wily levels. At this point, the game developers can guarantee that you have all the weapons. I'm mixed on how they use it, though. Requiring weapons for progression is smart to take advantage of the arsenal you spend the entire game building, but it brings the limited ammo into play. If you run out, you're kind of screwed. Later games have more generous ammo placements and more common drops, but this game really doesn't. It is neat how you use Super Arm to move blocks and Ice Slasher to freeze fire and counter larger enemies. The issue arises when they require use of the Magnet Beam, a weapon that appeared optional. Awful design choice in an otherwise good level. Immediately after is the iconic Yellow Devil. This is a hard but fair fight that is the poster child for I don't care, I'll just pause glitch him. His pattern is difficult to dodge but is 100% consistent. I doubt that I couldn't beat this guy without the pause glitch, though I didn't feel like game overing and restarting the level with all of his precise jumps over insta-kill spikes. In Wily 2, you start out with enemies coming from off-screen to knock you back into a hole. This level's painfully long and you have to refight Cutman and Elecman. At the end is Copy Robot, who is fine. He responds to your inputs and uses the same weapon as you. This fight probably wouldn't be as fine if I couldn't abuse his AI and get this pause glitch, although he can be very annoying if you let him jump around and spam shots everywhere. The next stage is a few short rooms of enemies and hop over penguins. It's not bad until you get to the worst boss in the game. If you use these Gutsman blocks at the start of the fight, he then becomes impossible to avoid. Every hit he takes makes him faster and the hole he comes out of is random, so he can hit you really unfairly. It's not incredibly hard if you go in knowing what to do, but the game being able to tell you screwed up, get a game over, and try again over a simple mistake that most players will make their first time is terrible design. The final level's fine. Aside from that, the hallways full of enemies and platforming are better than the previous Wily levels had. You can get the Yashichi to refill everything right before curb stomping the rest of the robot masters you didn't get prior. At the end of the boss rush, we get to the final fight. Despite having 2 phases, Dr. Wily is pretty easy, so with some effort he goes down, ending What? Good thing I was playing on that second playthrough. Wily's down, and Mega Man has put a stop to his plans for world domination. I guess that's all the plans he had, because he runs home with a song that would be remixed into Mega Man 2's iconic title screen theme. Mega Man will continue to fight for everlasting peace no matter what. I've always liked that about his character. He makes it home, ending Mega Man 1. Mega Man 1 to this day is a quality game that started one of my favorite series of all time. This game isn't great, it has really notable design flaws, and not every level is very fun to play. Some weapons aren't good, and some bosses are obnoxious. This game has a solid presentation and brought something to the table that no other games were bringing. I feel the first entry hasn't gotten enough credit, really. It's generally seen as okay, and I've seen a lot of people say to just skip this one entirely and go straight into Mega Man 2. While I'll admit that the second game is the best entry point if you've never played the series and want to get into it, I'd say that if you like what you play from some of the later entries, then definitely come back to this one. There was a remake called Mega Man Powered Up for the PSP, but I haven't played it. As for the original, I think of it the same way I do the first entry in most long-running series. Sonic 1, Metroid 1, Final Fantasy 1, Smash 64, all did a good job of setting up the gameplay of their series, even if it was still heavily flawed. Mega Man 1 is similar, although I'd argue that's better than most of the games I just listed. It's not perfect, but it's well worth playing 35 years later. I give Mega Man 1 a 7 out of 10. It's really good. So normally, that's where my reviews would end. I give the score, and that's the end of it. But since this is the first video of mine, I want to say some things about myself and the channel. First, I want to say that this channel is a hobby. I do not plan on making this a career. Don't expect a consistent upload schedule. I upload videos when they're ready. I don't want to rush a video out for the sake of having a video out. On this channel, I want to respectfully discuss video games and media in general. I have opinions that I'm passionate about sharing and try to be open about those who have differing opinions, and I hope others will be respectful towards my opinion, just as I am to yours. Just because I'm voicing my opinions for other people to hear, that doesn't mean my opinion has any more value than yours or anybody else's. No matter what happens, the one thing I hope above all, if anything happens with this little project of mine, is that we have fun for as long as it lasts. So I hope you enjoyed this and look forward to what I have in store in the future.